19-year-old Kenji Nakamura thought calling Chuck Norris grandpa age that evening was an act of great courage. But in that San Francisco dojo, he would discover that some legends never age and experience is more powerful than youth. The Golden Gate Martial Arts Academy stood as a monument to the evolution of traditional fighting arts in modern America, its sleek glass facade reflecting the San Francisco skyline while housing training spaces that honored both contemporary innovation and ancient wisdom. Located in the heart of the city's cultural district, the academy represented the successful fusion of Eastern martial traditions with Western athletic development, creating an environment where serious practitioners could pursue authentic training in state-of-the-art facilities. The academy's main training hall featured polished hardwood floors, traditional Japanese calligraphy adorning white walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the Bay Area. Modern training equipment coexisted harmoniously with classical elements, Makiwara striking posts alongside biomechanical analysis screens, traditional wooden weapons racks positioned near contemporary conditioning apparatus, meditation areas integrated with high-tech recovery stations. This carefully balanced environment attracted martial artists from around the world who understood that authentic development required both respect for traditional principles and embrace of contemporary training methodologies. The Academy's philosophy emphasized that true martial arts excellence emerged from the marriage of ancient wisdom and modern understanding, creating practitioners who honored the past while adapting to present realities. Kenji Nakamura moved through this prestigious environment like digital royalty claiming physical territory. At 19 years old, standing 5 feet 8 inches with the compact, explosive build characteristic of elite karate competition, he carried himself with the confident authority of someone who had achieved more recognition before age 20 than most martial artists garnered in entire careers. Kenji's rise to prominence had been meteoric. 3 consecutive national junior championships, a social media following exceeding 5 million across multiple platforms, and endorsement deals with major martial arts equipment manufacturers had established him as the face of karate's new generation. His Instagram featured highlight reels of devastating techniques executed with superhuman speed. His TikTok showcased innovations that pushed traditional kata into contemporary territory, and his YouTube channel documented training methods that combined classical forms with cutting-edge athletic science. Traditional karate needed updating for the modern world, Kenji would explain to journalists who asked about his approach to the art. The old masters were great for their time, but they trained with limited knowledge and primitive methods. My generation has access to sports science, biomechanical analysis, and training technologies that make us faster, stronger, and more technically precise than any previous era of karate practitioners. This perspective had shaped every aspect of Kenji's development and public persona. He viewed himself not just as a competitive athlete but as a revolutionary, someone whose achievements were helping to demonstrate that contemporary training methods had evolved martial arts beyond the limitations of traditional approaches. His victories weren't just personal accomplishments but proof that modern karate had transcended historical constraints. Kenji's fighting style reflected his belief in the superiority of contemporary training methodologies. Where traditional karate emphasized form, timing, and spiritual development, he had developed an approach that prioritized explosive athleticism, technical innovation, and the kind of measurable performance metrics that characterized modern sports science. His techniques were faster, his conditioning more sophisticated, his tactical understanding more analytically precise than anything previous generations had achieved. His training methodology was similarly revolutionary. Rather than copying classical approaches developed centuries earlier, Kenji worked with sports scientists to develop preparation methods specifically designed to optimize contemporary karate performance. His conditioning programs, nutritional strategies, and recovery protocols were all calibrated to maximize the advantages that modern knowledge provided over traditional training limitations. The Golden Gate Academy had become the epicenter of this evolution in American karate. The facility attracted young practitioners from throughout the country who understood that martial arts were entering a golden age where scientific training methods and technological innovation were proving superior to the intuitive approaches that had characterized earlier eras of development. Dr. James Morrison, the Academy's Director of Athletic Development and a former competitive fighter himself, had designed programs specifically to showcase and develop the technical sophistication that characterized contemporary karate excellence. What Kenji represents is the future of martial arts. Dr. Morrison would explain to visitors who seemed surprised by the technological complexity of modern training programs. Young practitioners approach development with a level of scientific understanding and analytical precision that's pushing the entire art form forward. They're not trying to imitate traditional karate, they're showing us how karate should actually be practiced. This philosophy had created in Kenji a deep conviction that contemporary karate had not just achieved equality with traditional approaches but had actually surpassed them in terms of technical sophistication, athletic development, and practical effectiveness. He genuinely believed that modern practitioners were demonstrating superior martial arts understanding and that historically rooted approaches to karate training were becoming obsolete. The Academy's emphasis on contemporary excellence had also shaped Kenji's attitude toward older generations of martial artists, particularly those whose careers had been built during eras when training methods were less scientifically sophisticated and technological resources were limited. He respected their historical contributions but viewed their continued involvement in contemporary karate as potentially counterproductive, well-meaning but ultimately irrelevant voices from a time when the art's highest levels had been artificially restricted by primitive training limitations. Masters from earlier generations just can't understand what we've accomplished, Kenji would say whenever discussions about martial arts history arose. They trained with incomplete knowledge and limited resources. Of course, their understanding of what's possible in karate is going to be restricted compared to what we've developed with modern methods. That Thursday evening, the Academy was hosting a special symposium about evolution in martial arts, featuring speakers who would discuss how karate had developed from its traditional origins into the sophisticated athletic discipline it had become. The event had drawn participants from throughout the martial arts community, all eager to learn from experts who understood how the art had transformed over recent decades. Among the invited speakers was Chuck Norris, who had been asked to discuss how classical martial arts principles had influenced the development of contemporary karate, and how modern practitioners could apply traditional training concepts to current competitive contexts. Chuck's invitation had come through cultural exchange organizations who appreciated his unique perspective as someone who had experienced both traditional martial arts and the early evolution of American karate development. Chuck arrived at the Golden Gate Academy dressed in simple dark jeans and a navy blue polo shirt, his presence immediately recognizable but characteristically understated. At 73 years old, he moved through the Academy's modern facilities with obvious appreciation for the technological sophistication involved while maintaining the careful awareness of someone who understood that different generations of martial artists had developed their skills in very different contexts. Accompanying Chuck were Dr. Sarah Kim, a martial arts historian who specialized in the cultural evolution of karate in America, and Michael Chun, a former competitive fighter who now worked as a consultant helping traditional practitioners understand contemporary training methods. They had come to the symposium as part of a broader research project about how classical fighting principles could inform modern athletic development. Mr. Norris, Dr. Kim explained as they toured the facility, we're particularly interested in your perspective on how the fundamental principles you learned in traditional training apply to the technical evolution we're seeing in contemporary karate. Chuck nodded thoughtfully, his eyes taking in the Academy's advanced training equipment with obvious respect for the athletes who used such sophisticated tools to push the boundaries of martial arts performance. The level of technical development in modern karate is remarkable. The practitioners training here are working with resources and knowledge that weren't available when I was competing in tournaments. Kenji had been observing Chuck's arrival from across the Academy, his assessment colored by assumptions that reflected his fundamental belief that contemporary karate practitioners had evolved beyond the relevance of earlier generations of traditionally trained martial artists. Here was someone whose primary claim to contemporary significance came from an era when training methods were primitive and scientific understanding was limited, someone who, in his worldview, simply couldn't understand the revolutionary advances that modern practitioners had brought to karate. "Look at this old-school guy," Kenji said to his training partner, Yuki, while nodding toward Chuck. They invited someone from back when karate was all mysticism and outdated training methods to talk about modern martial arts. What can he possibly understand about where the art has actually gone? Yuki, who served as one of Kenji's primary practice partners and had developed tremendous respect for his technical knowledge, glanced at Chuck with the practiced eye of someone trained to assess martial arts competence through visible movement patterns. Kenji, Chuck Norris, was a legitimate world champion with serious competitive credentials. Maybe his traditional background could offer some valuable insights into fundamental principles. Kenji's response reflected his genuine belief that the primitive training methods of historical martial arts had fundamentally limited the development of karate during earlier eras. Yuki, he competed in a world where training was based on tradition and mysticism instead of science and measurable results. Of course, the karate was going to be less sophisticated than what we've developed once modern training methods were finally applied. As the afternoon's formal presentations began, Kenji listened with professional attention to discussions about technical evolution, training methodology, and the scientific principles that governed contemporary athletic performance. His own contribution to the group discussion was characteristically confident, emphasizing the superiority of current karate over historical approaches, the necessity of scientifically informed perspectives for understanding martial arts' full potential, and the revolutionary changes that modern training had brought to competitive karate. Chuck had been observing Kenji throughout the afternoon with growing respect for his obvious dedication and impressive achievements. The young champion's technical knowledge was genuinely sophisticated, his competitive accomplishments were undeniable, and his commitment to advancing karate through contemporary methods was admirable. During the question and answer period that followed Chuck's presentation about traditional principles in modern training, Kenji raised his hand with the kind of confident authority that characterized all his interactions but concealed fundamental skepticism about the relevance of traditionally trained martial artists to contemporary karate. "Mr. Norris," Kenji said, his voice carrying the assured tone of someone accustomed to being heard with respect in elite martial arts circles, "I appreciate your historical contributions to karate, but I'm curious about how experience from primitive training eras can be relevant to understanding what martial arts have actually become once scientific methods were applied." Chuck nodded encouragingly, recognizing the underlying challenge in the question, while appreciating the passion behind Kenji's advocacy for contemporary martial arts advancement. "That's an excellent point, Kenji. Modern training methods have certainly brought new levels of technical sophistication and analytical understanding that weren't fully developed in earlier eras. The advancement has been revolutionary," Kenji continued, his tone maintaining professional courtesy while making his position clear. "Contemporary karate practitioners have proven that scientific training, biomechanical analysis, and measurable performance development are superior to the intuitive, tradition-based approaches that characterized historical martial arts. How do you see traditionally trained practitioners contributing to understanding karate that has evolved beyond those limitations?" The question hung in the air with obvious challenge, though Kenji's tone remained respectful. Dr. Kim leaned forward with interest, recognizing that this exchange might reveal something important about how contemporary practitioners viewed their relationship to martial arts history. Chuck considered the question carefully before responding. "You're absolutely right about the technical evolution that modern training has brought to karate. The level of analytical understanding and systematic development in contemporary practice is remarkable compared to what was being achieved in earlier training eras." Kenji's expression remained professionally attentive, but his eyes showed that Chuck's answer hadn't fully addressed his concerns about the fundamental limitations of traditionally trained approaches to karate that had moved beyond historical constraints. "Given that evolution, how do you see traditional training methods contributing meaningfully to athletic development that has moved beyond primitive limitations?" "I think the value might be in understanding that karate principles transcend the specific training methods used to develop them," Chuck replied with genuine respect for Kenji's achievements. "The best insights from traditional practice might be applicable regardless of whether they were originally developed through scientific or intuitive training approaches." Kenji nodded politely, but his body language suggested that he remained unconvinced by what he viewed as an attempt to maintain the relevance of outdated approaches in an art that had been revolutionized by contemporary training methods. As the formal presentations concluded and the event moved into informal discussion and demonstration periods, he found himself increasingly bothered by what he saw as insufficient recognition of how fundamentally modern training had transformed karate. During a break in the proceedings, Kenji approached Chuck with the kind of respectful formality that characterized professional martial arts interactions, but with an underlying agenda that went beyond simple courtesy. "Mr. Norris," he said, maintaining proper athletic etiquette, "I hope you won't think me disrespectful, but I'd be very interested in seeing how traditional training approaches compare to what contemporary practitioners have developed. Perhaps you'd be willing to participate in a demonstration." Chuck's expression showed neither surprise nor defensiveness at what was clearly a challenge disguised as an educational opportunity. "I'd be happy to participate in any demonstration that would help explore these questions about martial arts evolution." "Excellent," Kenji said, his tone maintaining perfect professional courtesy, while his eyes revealed satisfaction at having created an opportunity to demonstrate the superiority of contemporary karate approaches over traditional training methods. "Perhaps we could explore how scientifically developed karate differs from approaches developed during primitive training eras?" Dr. Morrison immediately recognized the significance of what was developing and discreetly signaled Michael to begin documenting the interaction. This kind of spontaneous exchange between different generations and training methodologies was exactly the type of encounter their research was designed to analyze. Within minutes, a section of the academy had been cleared and the symposium participants had gathered to observe what promised to be an illuminating demonstration of how different approaches to martial arts development might interact in practical application. Kenji prepared for the demonstration with championship precision, changing into his training GI with the economical efficiency of someone who had spent years optimizing every aspect of athletic preparation. His movements were fluid and explosive, each gesture reflecting the kind of technical sophistication and scientific precision that characterized elite contemporary karate. Chuck's preparation was notably different. He simply stood quietly in the designated area, doing gentle stretching movements that looked more like maintenance exercises than competitive preparation. At 73, he no longer possessed the explosive athleticism that characterized contemporary practitioners, but his presence suggested a different kind of readiness. Not the systematic preparation of modern athletics, but the settled confidence of someone who understood fundamental principles that transcended specific training methodologies. "What would you like to explore?" Chuck asked, his tone indicating genuine interest in learning about contemporary karate rather than defending traditional approaches. Kenji's response revealed the depth of his confidence in modern training evolution. "Let's explore how scientifically developed karate compares to what was possible when training was limited to traditional methods." "Sounds interesting," Chuck agreed. "I should mention that my training comes from a very different era and context, so this should be educational for both of us." Kenji moved into a karate stance that demonstrated the kind of technical refinement that characterized elite contemporary competition. His positioning was perfect for the multidimensional tactical engagement that defined modern karate, and his mental preparation was obvious in his focused attention to the biomechanical variables that determine success in scientifically informed practice. "Please engage as you would using traditional methods," Kenji said, his confidence in contemporary training methodology absolute. "I'll demonstrate how current scientific development handles historical approaches." Chuck approached with respectful caution, engaging with Kenji in what appeared to be a straightforward demonstration of basic karate principles. Kenji immediately began applying his most refined techniques, combinations of striking, movement, and tactical positioning designed to showcase the superiority of contemporary karate over traditional training methods. But something unexpected happened. As Kenji executed techniques that had proven devastatingly effective against elite contemporary competition, Chuck seemed to simply adapt. Not through superior modern training or systematic counter techniques, but through an understanding of fundamental karate principles that seemed to transcend the specific training methods used to develop them. Kenji's attacks, technically sophisticated and scientifically precise though they were, found their effectiveness somewhat limited by Chuck's simple adherence to basic principles of timing, distance, and spatial awareness that appeared to work regardless of the training methodology used to develop them or the generation of practitioner applying them. "Interesting," Kenji said, his confidence momentarily shaken, but his determination to demonstrate contemporary karate superiority intensified. "Let me show you something more representative of scientifically developed karate training." This time, Kenji employed even more sophisticated methodology, using principles of biomechanical engagement that reflected the cutting edge of contemporary karate training. His technique was flawless, exactly as it had been refined through years of scientifically informed development against the most advanced practitioners in the world. Again, Chuck seemed to neutralize Kenji's approach not through superior contemporary techniques or scientifically developed counter-methods, but through positioning and timing so fundamental that they appeared to work regardless of what advanced training methods were being employed against them. Kenji's perfect contemporary development found its effectiveness limited by Chuck's simple adherence to basic principles that seemed to transcend the training characteristics he had assumed determined karate effectiveness. For the third attempt, Kenji abandoned his teaching mode and began applying techniques with the intensity that had made him a national champion. He employed a rapid series of contemporary karate methods, each one proven effective in elite competition, each one flowing smoothly into the next according to tactical patterns that represented the pinnacle of scientifically informed development. Chuck responded to this increased intensity not with matching contemporary techniques or scientifically developed countermethods, but with what appeared to be effortless adherence to karate principles that existed beyond specific training approaches. He seemed to understand the basic mechanics that made Kenji's contemporary techniques work, responding to fundamental concepts rather than specific applications and maintaining perfect defensive positioning regardless of what advanced training methods were being employed against him. After several minutes of this increasingly complex exchange, Kenji stopped, breathing harder than someone of his conditioning should have been after what appeared to be a relatively controlled demonstration. "I don't understand," he said, his voice carrying genuine confusion rather than defensiveness. "Your approach, it doesn't follow contemporary training methods, doesn't use scientific development or measurable performance metrics. But somehow," Chuck's expression showed only respectful attention, no trace of generational superiority or training methodology condescension. "Your karate is genuinely excellent, Kenji. Your technical development is obviously sophisticated, and your competitive achievements are remarkable. Then how? You're applying contemporary karate techniques exactly as scientific training has taught you," Chuck explained patiently. "But you're applying them against someone who's responding to the fundamental principles that make karate effective, rather than to the specific training methods used to develop those techniques." Kenji looked confused, so Chuck continued. "Contemporary training has brought incredible advances to karate, but when you encounter someone who responds to basic karate principles rather than specific training applications, the advanced methodologies become less important than the fundamentals they're built on." The insight hit Kenji like a revelation. For all his scientific training, for all his understanding of contemporary karate excellence, he had been assuming that martial arts effectiveness was fundamentally determined by training sophistication rather than by understanding basic principles that transcended specific developmental approaches. "But modern karate evolution," Kenji began. "Modern karate evolution has brought incredible advances to martial arts," Chuck agreed. "But effective karate transcends training methodology. The principles that make contemporary techniques work are the same principles that make any effective karate work, regardless of how they were developed or who developed them." Dr. Morrison stepped forward, recognizing that the demonstration had revealed something profound about the relationship between training advancement and universal martial arts principle. "What we've just witnessed," he said carefully, "illustrates something important about karate development. Scientific advancement in training is incredibly valuable, but martial arts effectiveness ultimately depends on understanding principles that transcend the specific methodologies used to develop them." Kenji stood in the training area, his worldview undergoing the kind of fundamental reassessment that only comes from encountering something that challenges core assumptions. For years, he had believed that karate excellence was fundamentally connected to training sophistication, and that contemporary methods had revolutionized martial arts by introducing superior approaches. "I think," Kenji said slowly, "I've been an excellent student of contemporary training methods, but maybe I've been assuming that scientific advancement determines karate principles rather than the other way around." Chuck's response showed the kind of wisdom that could only come from decades of learning across multiple contexts and training environments. "Contemporary training has brought incredible technical advances to karate. But maybe the goal isn't proving that newer is always better. It's understanding the principles that make effective karate possible for anyone, regardless of their training background." As the demonstration concluded and the academy began to return to normal activity, Kenji approached Chuck with a request that would have been unthinkable at the beginning of the afternoon. "Chuck," he said, using the informal address for the first time, "would you be willing to work with contemporary practitioners? Not to abandon scientific training, but to help us understand how modern methods and fundamental principles can strengthen each other." Chuck's response exemplified the humility that had characterized his entire approach to the interaction. "I think I could learn as much from contemporary training as I could contribute about traditional principles. Your technical development is incredibly sophisticated, probably more advanced than anything that was being done when I was competing. But maybe together we can explore how scientific advancement and fundamental understanding can support each other." In the months that followed, the Golden Gate Academy quietly incorporated elements of principle-based training into its programs. Kenji maintained all the technical sophistication and contemporary knowledge that had made him a champion, but he began approaching karate as an expression of universal principles rather than just training advancement. His competition performance continued at championship level as he learned to apply advanced techniques with understanding of why they worked rather than just how they had been scientifically developed. More importantly, Kenji's advocacy for contemporary karate evolved to emphasize development and excellence rather than methodological superiority. The video documentation from that afternoon's demonstration became a case study in martial arts education programs throughout the academic community, not because it showed one training approach defeating another, but because it demonstrated how scientific advancement and universal principles could strengthen each other rather than competing. A year later, when Kenji successfully defended his national title for the fourth time, he dedicated the victory to what he called, "The day I learned that karate excellence transcends all training boundaries, scientific and traditional, contemporary and classical, young and experienced." Chuck, characteristically, deflected credit for Kenji's continued success. He already had all the technical skills and competitive fire he needed, Chuck told Dr. Kim when she asked about the transformation she had witnessed. "Sometimes we just need someone to help us see that progress isn't about replacing wisdom with science. It's about expanding access to the principles that make excellence possible for everyone." And sometimes the most profound lessons come not from proving generational superiority, but from discovering that true karate excellence transcends all temporal boundaries, recognizing that the most effective martial arts come from combining contemporary advancement with timeless understanding, and that mastery, like truth, knows no age.